Okay, great. So now that we've covered the funding fee and the disability, that's good to know to have that information. Now, where I would like to go with this is that I noticed that sometimes sellers don't want to take VA.
Sure.
I don't know why, but they kind of give you a
Well,
pushback on
I
that.
think unfortunately what's happened is many years ago, VA loans had a lot different rules, and the appraisal rules were definitely a lot more difficult
Okay.
on a VA loan compared to, let's say, a conventional loan. Many years ago, VA had what they called a VC sheet. And it was literally a sheet that the appraiser would have to check off and go down the check marks to look for deficiencies on the property. And a lot of it was like silly things, peeling paint, just trivial maintenance items, but it was extensive. In recent years, they've eliminated that. So there is no more VC sheet attached to an appraisal. It really is just an appraiser looking at the overall general condition of the property. So it's gotten a lot easier than it was before. Previously, sellers were mandated to pay certain fees. Florida is on a state deviation list, so in the state of Florida, the veteran can actually pay for the termite inspection.
Oh, okay.
And that's very commonly misconstrued because sellers and a lot of listing agents alike believe that their seller is subject to paying more fees if they accept a VA offer. That's not the case. They don't have to pay a dime. So the veteran can pay their own fees, including the pest inspection. The only time that's different is if the lender is charging a 1% origination fee.
Okay.
So if you have a lender that's maxing out their fees, which no lender should really do, then some of the rules change a little bit and the seller may be subject to mandatory fees, but it's only in that circumstance. So in any normal circumstance, if you're dealing with a reputable lender, they're never going to max out their fees, at least we don't. And that allows the veteran to pay for the termite inspection, the dock prep, whatever other items, and the seller pays nothing.
Okay.
Also, there's a new revised VA addendum.
Okay.
On that new VA addendum, there's an automatic section that talks about a seller paying underwriting origination fees and things like that. That is not a mandatory item. So for us on the lending side, whether that paragraph is in that addendum or not makes no difference. So what I normally suggest is that if you're in a competitive situation, you're trying to get a VA offer accepted, take all those things out and just put 0 so that the seller doesn't have to pay anything. That way their net on a VA deal is exactly the same as it will be on a conventional deal or anything else.
Okay. Now, I run into this a lot, and I really want to touch on the inspection versus an appraisal. A lot of veterans are confused. They think they don't need a home inspection because they're having a VA appraisal, and supposedly, well, the VA is so stringent, we don't need a home inspection.
Not at all.
So please kind of explain.
So again, VA appraisals have gotten a little bit easier over the years, right?
Okay.
So the appraiser is not your home inspector. They will not do an inspection at all. What they're looking for is the overall general repair of the home and that it's maintained in decent condition.
Okay.
Their basic standard is that it's habitable. You can live in it. They'll look under the cabinet to make sure the faucet in the kitchen or in the bathroom under the vanity is not actively leaking, but they're not going to go any further. When it comes to the roof, let's say, they're going to visually look at the roof from the street. They're not climbing up on the roof. They're not looking at the actual shingles. They're not looking at the underlayment, the plywood. They're visually just looking it over, saying, I don't see any curling shingles, or I see curling shingles. If there's a shingle missing, they will note it on the appraisal, but that's as far as it goes. So I would always recommend you get a home inspection independent of the appraisal. Do not rely on the appraisal because the appraiser's job is not to inspect the house.
Okay.
His job is to determine that the house is habitable, overall in decent repair, and then to put a valuation number on it so that the staff appraisal reviewer at the lender, incidentally, the appraiser doesn't issue the value. The appraiser on a VA loan will give us comparable sales. They'll do all the calculations and computations, but the SAR, the staff appraisal reviewer at the lender, is the person that issues the notice of value.
Oh.
That's where the value becomes official, and we go, this is what the appraised value is.
Okay.
And also important to note, we don't get this leeway on any other loan. The only loan that this exists on is VA. That SAR has at least a 5% leeway, which means that if you have a contract price of $200,000, let's say, and the appraiser does his thing, and he comes up with 195 or 194, whatever that number is, that SAR can review the appraisal, review some comps additionally, and they have a 5% leeway in what they can do. So they can still meet the contract price, even though the appraiser did not. And then the other part to note too is if we're talking about appraisals and values, I think we should cover what the differences are between conventional VA and FHA, because there is really a huge difference in the process.
Okay.
And most people aren't aware of that.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Well, if I order a conventional appraisal, the appraisal comes in, I get the value, and the only time I know or have any idea what the value is when it comes in.
Okay.
Right? Same goes for FHA, same goes for USDA. VA is a little bit different. VA, we order the appraisal.
Okay.
The appraiser goes out to the property, he does his thing, he comes back, he does the desk work. In doing that desk work, if the appraiser feels that he's going to fall short on value and not meet the contract price, he's obligated to notify the lender and to also give us a heads up to go, hey, Mr. Lender, I'm looking at this appraisal, I'm finishing it up, I'm not meeting the contract price. Could you help me out?
Oh.
And what that means is that he now gives us 48 hours in order to provide him more comparable sales. That process is called Tidewater. In that Tidewater process, we as a lender then go back to you as the agent, to the listing agent, and we give you the heads up. We go, look, the appraiser reached out. They say that they're not meeting the contract price. I don't quite know how far away we are, but why don't you provide me some comparable sales? We have 48 hours to deliver them. And now once we deliver that to the appraiser, not only are they obligated to consider them, they have to note inside the report what each comparable sale that you gave me was. They have to write down inside the report why they considered it or why did not consider it. They have to give a very detailed explanation as to what happened with those comparable sales, why they were used, why they were not used. And more often than not, what happens is if you give me good solid comps, most of the VA appraisers will work with us and they'll bring it to value if the comps are good. Now, we always ask for apples to apples, and look, sometimes we get an apple, an orange, and a pear, and that's just not the same thing. But if your data is good and your comparables are good, more often than not, we really don't have a big issue. The other cool part is that even if, let's say, we don't meet that value, right? We go through Tidewater, you gave me the comps, the appraisal comes in, and we're still $20,000 short or $10,000 short, whatever that number is. The VA has a reconsideration of value process on the top of the Tidewater process. There's a staff appraiser at the VA in the Regional Loan Center in St. Petersburg, Florida, that lenders have access to. And if you and I and the veteran and the seller all don't agree with the value, we can take that report along with a rebuttal, along with all your comps, plus any other information you want to provide, and we can send it down to St. Petersburg, and they will, within a few days, review it. Not only will they review it, they'll make adjustments. And I've had a lot of ROVs go down there where we've done a pretty effective job with the help of you as the agent, and the ROV comes back higher, and we get a little bit closer to making the deal. Sometimes we get right to contract price. That process doesn't exist on any other loan.
No, I've never heard of it.
No,
never
unfortunately,
even knew that
this
existed.
is the problem, right? Is
Never
the
knew it
education of
existed. Never knew it existed. Well, I have one question, and then we're going to go to the education part. Now, I get veterans that are like, I'm very handy. I'm handy. I grew up doing construction with my dad. Can I buy a house that needs repairs? with a VA loan, can they buy a house that needs repairs? And if they can, to what extent are we looking at?
Possibly. Possibly.
Okay.
So the answer to that depends on what specifically you're doing for the loan, right? Because you have a VA loan, it's 100% financing, that's all well and good. Are we talking about doing just a standard VA loan, or are we talking about doing a VA loan with renovation? Because you could do
They
potentially
have a VA loan with renovations.
VA does have VA renovation loans, and you can take a house like what you're talking about, and assuming the borrower qualifies, and assuming you're working with a lender that offers that product,
Okay.
you could potentially buy a fixer-upper and roll in the construction rehab costs. Now, there's some caveats.
Oh.
It has to appraise for the after-repaired value.
Okay.
So the value has to be there. The veteran has to qualify. Typically, lenders that do those loans want a little better credit. Ratios have to be within guidelines.
Okay.
So a little bit tighter qualifying, but it is potentially possible.
Oh, wow.
More often than not, a lot of lenders will shy away from the reno piece because on the lending side, for us administratively, it can be cumbersome.
Okay.
So not everybody offers the product, but to answer the question, it's possible.
Do you offer the product?
Yes,
Okay.
under the right circumstances.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, so now obviously I need some VA education. So
That's
now
why
with
we're
that,
here.
that's why we're here.
That's
But
right.
let's talk about your because you have like you're the VA boot camp guy.
Right, so
explain that
I
to me.
learned the product from Military Mortgage Boot Camp.
Okay.
I've been through their training system. I'm actually a certified instructor with them, so I can do continuing education. I can teach other lenders and realtors how to do VA loans and all about the VA product. So when you're dealing with me and you're dealing with my team, you're dealing with people that know that product inside and out. We know the 26-7, which is the guidelines for all VA loans.
Okay.
I know the contents of that, what the guidelines are, what we can and can't do, what a veteran can get away with and not get away with when it comes to qualifying.
Okay.
But and it's interesting too because look, the other part of VA loans is even though they're 100%, they have the lowest default rate of every loan.
Okay.
And because the VA has kind of figured out a good way to qualify the veteran that is more effective. So they're not only looking at credit score and debt ratio. Sometimes on a VA loan, debt ratio almost doesn't count.
Okay.
What we're looking for more than debt ratio is residual income. And VA is the only loan out there that actually looks at the cost of utilities on the house. And it's part of the qualifying process, which most folks don't know and most realtors don't know, is look, not only are we looking at your credit and your liabilities, we're looking at what the water bill is going to be, what the utilities are going to be, and then based on those things, we're calculating a residual income, like what do you have left over after all your bills? The reality is, and we've proven this over the years on VA loans, if you have enough residual income left over after figuring all these things out, whether you have a 35% debt to income ratio or a 55% debt to income ratio, the residual income is the key piece. So a lot of times on a VA loan, we can go further on a higher debt ratio if the residual is there, whereas on a conventional loan, 45% is a hard stop, right?
Right.
It doesn't approve any higher than that.
Okay.
But if you have a veteran, and look, it's funny because statistically speaking, most VA loans have a higher credit score than their conventional counterpart. So you have a better qualified borrower most of the time on VA versus conventional.
Okay.
They also tend to have more reserves. Why? Because military members tend to be more disciplined. It is what it is, right? But what happens is if you have a veteran with a good residual income, a higher debt to income ratio, let's say 62%,
Okay.
which is unloanable on any other loan, right?
Yeah, I've never heard of
Traditionally.
62%, but okay.
We've closed them with a 62% debt ratio because the residual income is there, the veteran had reserves, we know there's enough money left over to pay for incidentals, and the VA has an automated system, just like every other loan.
Okay.
And that automated system outweighs the risk and goes residual check, monthly reserves check. I have 6 months PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance in the bank check. Credit score is good. Loan's automatically approved. And if you have an automatic approval, you're as good as free.
Okay.
Okay.
And here I was thinking I was knowledgeable in VA, and I've come to realize that obviously I need to take me a VA class, because
Sure.
I didn't know they had so much things,
It's
so
a
many
lot.
different products out there. I know straight standard VA, what they're looking for in the appraisal, what, just the general gist of it.
For the most part, the same people that are doing your conventional loans for the appraisals are also doing your VA. It's the same pool of appraisers. There's only so many of them, right?
Right.
So they're not an inferior appraisal in any way, and in a lot of ways they're superior because we have 2 to 3 opportunities to make value, which we just don't get on any other loan. Normally, on most other loans, you're flying blind until the appraisal is delivered, right?
Yes,
On
we are.
VA, we know ahead of time. We know, hey, look, it looks like maybe this was overlisted a little bit. Or maybe the appraiser's just struggling to get data, and you happen to know the one that closed last week that's not recorded yet, and you gave me that comp. And that's all the appraiser needed in order to make the contract
Push
price.
it over.
Right? And remember, too, like our market, we're split between 2 different MLS systems, sometimes 3 if you go up to Citrus.
Right. Yeah.
It's easy to miss a comp.
True.
I hate to say it, but it happens. Like, how many times
It
does it
happens
happen
a lot.
and we go do
It
a
happens
rebuttal,
a
right?
lot, and it's like, and when you say rebuttal, it's interesting to hear that with VA you can do the rebuttal and actually win it, because I will be honest with you, I've done rebuttals with FHA, conventional, US. You never win. You don't win. You're doing it. You're pushing paper because they're not going to change the value. I don't care how many viable comps you give them. I have never seen them go back and readjust the value.
Look, 90% of it is how it's presented.
Okay.
Right? How is the lender presenting the information? How is the report being written? Are we talking about somebody just submitting something on a letterhead? Or are we talking about somebody taking the data that you give us, actually putting it on a grid, just like an appraiser would do, making the adjustments, following the guidelines, and doing all the net calculations so that when we get to the bottom and we see all the adjustments, that gives us the true valuation of the comparable sale that you gave us. Now, if that holds up, it's really hard to say no. But if you didn't do the work, then you didn't do the work. And that's where a lot of this comes into, is you have to be dealing with knowledgeable enough people that will do the work and put in the time to make the effort so that you can have a successful reconsideration of value or a successful rebuttal to an underwriter based on what the actual guidelines are, whatever the case may be. But I will tell you this, is that I've personally bought and sold a lot of property. Sometimes I buy them, I renovate them, we put them back on the market. Short of a cash offer, and sometimes even a cash offer because cash tends to be less, I will personally always favor VA over any other offer. If all things remain the same, I'd much rather deal with a VA buyer because the underwriting is better and easier. Underwriters tend to bend over backwards to make approvals work for veterans.
Okay.
We know the Veterans Administration bends over backwards to make our reconsiderations work, to make all kinds of adjustments work. So all the way around, it's just an easier loan to close. And statistically, I can get through a VA loan in probably 60% of the time that it takes me to do a conventional loan.
Wow.
When you're talking compared to an FHA loan, I can get through 50% faster. So I know I'm going to close faster. I know that I'm helping a veteran use their well-earned benefits, because they did earn them. I mean, there's no question about that. And it's just an easier, better loan process. So knowing what I know on the inside, I'm always going to favor that loan.
Well,
Yeah.
so what I want to do now that you've like blown my head off, Tell people how to reach you. I mean, tell them a little bit about how they can get in touch with you.
Sure.
And especially to ask questions, because I'm sure someone out there is like me, have no idea what half of this stuff was.
Yeah.
So how can we get in touch with you?
You can call me directly on my cell phone. The number is 727-946-0904. My name is Steve Fingerman. I own ELOANS Mortgage. And look, even if I'm not doing the loan, if you happen to be a veteran and you're having a tough time getting an offer accepted, you're having a tough time with an underwriter or an appraisal, whatever the case may be, whether I'm doing the loan or not, call me. I'll give you some advice. I'll tell you what you can realistically expect and how to navigate the situation that you're in. I'd be always honored to help a veteran.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for coming in here and hanging out with me. And we're going to wrap this up for today. So for a full picture of today's housing market and how it plays into your home plans, reach out to me, Kimberly Watson Johnson, at 727-946-6949. That number again is 727-946-6949. Thank you for watching Giving You Keys to Home Ownership. See you next week when we will go over staging and how it can get you more money for your home. Thanks again. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.